All right, hello and welcome to our very first Off by One security stream of 2024 with my very special guest, Joshua Wright. So, a couple of quick things I want to start with. Again, first off and foremost, thank you so much for joining. I know it's been a bit of a quiet last month with regard to the stream because holiday time, of course, makes everything chaotic. And people who think they have a lot of time to do a lot of research end up falling short, including myself. That's who I'm speaking about personally. but, but now that we got the new year starting, I've got a lot of really fun things I want to put together. I've got sorted for this year, a lot of great guests coming on. But let me do an introduction here with Joshua Wright. I've known Josh for, man, it's been at least 15 years. I don't even know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, a long time. I think you were here when I first started teaching at Sands, probably, right? Like, yeah, one of
Yeah,
the,
yeah. I just passed 20 years with Sands. Yeah.
yeah, so you've got me beat there. Wow. So, Josh, those of you who don't know, he won't say it himself, but he's a brilliant developer, especially in C and such, and has contributed some amazing tools to the workspace. And I'm sure you've used some of them over the years. If you've been into hacking for a while now, he is one of the original co-authors with me on the course 660 at SANS, which is on advanced pen testing and exploit writing. He wrote sections on things like cryptography and looking at doing network attacks against routers and switches and all kinds of fun stuff there. He also was the author and did a lot of authorship on wireless hacking courseware and mobile device hacking. Just has a huge wide breadth of knowledge, and most recently for years now has been leading up as the author of 504, which is our flagship course at the SANS Institute on hacking techniques and incident handling and all kinds of other fun stuff. So I've had the pleasure to work with and teach with Josh for a long, long time, and certainly someone I definitely go to ask questions when I don't know the answers to certain things, and hopefully I give that back at some times. But we'll see going forward. But this, I've been going back and forth trying to get Josh to come on for quite some time now, and it's always a challenge to try to figure out, like, what is it that I had to share that would be interesting to the community. And obviously, for most people, it's like all of it. Just give us everything. We would love to have anything that you would like to share. But when it comes down to like picking something that you personally would like to say to the world, it can be quite a difficult decision. And so Josh came and said, hey, I want to do a talk on, or a session on accidental bug discovery, which right away piqued my interest because that's something that we've all done before, whether we knew it or not. We've accidentally crashed applications. Like a million examples go flying through my mind as soon as I see that name up on the screen. And it could mean many different things as well. So I don't want to take away kind of what the definition Josh is going to be sharing with us when it comes to accidental bug discovery is, but we'll go back and forth like we normally do, have a little banter. If you have questions, please do post them up and I will try to get to them. I'll try to let Josh know that there's a good question waiting, but let's make this interactive, and I'll just start by letting Josh kind of kick this off a bit.
Hey, thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks for having me. Steve has been trying to get me on to the stream for a bit now, but I resisted because I really didn't know what I had to share. I'm interested in a lot of things. I work for a consulting firm called CounterHack. We do a lot of penetration tests. I'm spending a lot of time right now looking at hackable body cameras, for surveillance and for monitoring purposes. And it seems like it's just a constant churn, right? You different product, different target, different cloud, different web application, whatever it is. And I think over the years, it's changed my perspective on a lot of things. In some ways, I'm really jaded. People say to me, Josh, is it really safe to do online banking? And I say, absolutely not, but I do it anyway because I don't want to go to the bank. It's always a risk reward kind of thing. But I think what's most interesting when I kind of take a moment of self-reflection is that the security analysis that I've done has changed how I look at the world and how I look at not just technology, but everything that I interact with, whether it's going out shopping or interacting with people or just all the things that we do on a regular basis. So I added a little pretext here. Looks around. Yeah, I could rob this place, and just to put that out to everybody, I don't think I'm alone. Do you ever go into a store and then kind of look around and you're kind of waiting and you think, yeah, I could rob this place. Like, you just kind of get a sense of it because, we're not, perhaps not physical security specialists. I'm not. But, when you look around, I feel like I've developed that insight to be able to say, here's a vulnerability, or that's not a vulnerability. If you read, sometimes I'll hop onto the subreddit /r/bug bounty, and there's a lot of posts from people that are saying things like, is this a bug? Is this a vulnerability? Is this going to give me a big payout in the bug bounty, kind of world? And a lot of time I look at those things and I think the people looking at these and trying to find, look at these sites, trying to find vulnerabilities, don't understand that you need to ask the question about what is the business risk to decide what the value is for that kind of bug. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about 3 bugs that I just kind of found by accident. Okay. I realized that I don't look at websites like other normal people. So I kind of wanted to talk about some examples, and maybe this will hopefully inspire some folks viewing to be able to look at things and try to apply what we learn from a security perspective to all things that we interact with. Okay. So here's me. Hi. I made this slide deck, but I'm really not going to use much of it. My plan is really just to do a bunch of demo. And I'm going to start by telling a story about sending some Christmas cookies. So a customer that we do a lot of work with at CounterHack, kind of jokingly said, I'm waiting for my cookies. And I said, well, then we're going to send you cookies. That's no, you could have just asked, but we're going to send you cookies because we love you as a customer. We love you as a human. And, we want to send you some cookies. So I just kind of looked around and I Googled, cookies and cookie delivery. And I found this place called levanbakery.com. Turns out they're in New York. It's kind of famous. I don't really know too much about it. But I went to their website and I said, all right, I'm gonna order some cookies. I'm gonna send them to this client, and I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna order some cookies here. I don't know what we have for cookies, but let's see, nationwide shipping for cookies. Yeah, I'm gonna go for the signature cookie assortment here. I'm gonna get a 12-pack of cookies. I'm gonna add them to my bag here. I'm not going to get the special, ornament, okay? But so I'm taking a look at this, and I'm saying, oh, this is a gift, and I'm saying, okay, here's the gift message, okay? So enter the recipient's email address. So I'm going to, okay, and it asks for a gift message here. And for my customer, we've done a lot of web application security work. We talk about things like cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. And I thought, how funny would it be if I put like a little JavaScript pop-up in the gift message to kind of say, as our thank you. So script alert, hi from Josh, and close script tag. Okay, so this is what I did, just kind of like a little joke, not a big deal. And then I said save, and then and then I realized that now it's executing the JavaScript without doing any kind of filtering or input or output validation on the website here. So I said, oh, okay, all right, well, I mean, okay, that's fine. So then I'm kind of shopping around, and I'm kind of, and then now I notice the pop-up is just persistent on every single page that I go to on this target website. This is the kind of thing that I think, this is accidental bug discovery, right? I didn't even mean to find a cross-site scripting vulnerability here. But, the thing that one of the subtitles of this presentation is, strong job security for the foreseeable future. These bugs just aren't going away, and so we see these types of things, and I didn't really look into it too much. It could be a self XSS, I don't know if it's stored. It doesn't look like it's reflected as part of the URL, but I didn't really check the post parameters on it. this kind of thing, I think we see a lot. These cross-site scripting vulnerabilities still happen all the time. And it's one of those things that organizations just aren't really looking at well enough in their organizations to try to understand kind of what the risk is and what's going on. For me, whenever I look at a website, it's hard for me to actually get the job done, right? My wife will say, can you order something? And 2 hours later, she's like, did you do it yet? And I'm like, I'm this close to SQL injection. Don't bother me, right? So, it's the kind of thing where, you look at these websites and you kind of get a sense. This might not be a significant vulnerability, but it's definitely an interesting precursor. If at a most basic form element, they're not doing input or output validation on the site, then that's probably a bad portend for any future security that we might see on this website as well. So I wrote up these slides just because I didn't want that website to get fixed between when I made the slides and today, and not everything to show. But this is actually something I found when I ordered cookies for a customer last year. So I was ordering cookies for Christmas last year. So, it's been a year, a little over, since I reported this vulnerability to the customer. And I wrote to them and I said, hey, this is a clear vulnerability. I'm not looking for a bug bounty payout. This is not, I'm not trying to do anything like that. I'm just trying to let you know, FYI, you got a problem here. If I'm willing to volunteer to give you guys insight to be able to fix it, whatever. I got a message back, thank you for reporting this to us, but no fix. So this is one of those things where you report a vulnerability. I'm kind of going out of my way, taking my time and trying to help somebody, and it's just kind of disappointing, And at some point you're like, well, the vulnerability is still on your website. I don't really feel bad about demonstrating on a public stream because it's been a year since I reported it. It's kind of a tricky issue. So that's the first one, that I wanted to talk about here. This is probably a low risk issue for them. Maybe they decided they weren't even going to fix it whatsoever. It could be a self-XSS, but it is, for me, an indicator of future behavior. If this were my customer and I saw that, then I would ask myself, well, where else are they not doing input and output validation on the site? And what other vulnerabilities are there? And how else can I use that to exploit the site, perhaps beyond cross-site scripting into command injection or SQL injection or an SSRF attack or, all sorts of different web attack vulnerabilities?
I know this is a hard question to answer because we've got people coming from all over the world, of course, who are going to be watching this either live or in the future once it lives on YouTube. But when you get into the legal ramifications and concerns around doing stuff like testing websites and accidentally doing something versus intentionally doing something, do you have any recommendations as to what to do and not to do in that case?
Yeah. So the question that I always ask myself is, if I were in front of a judge and the judge, who is not a technology person, is evaluating my actions, do I feel reasonably confident that I can explain that they were not done with any kind of malice, right? And I think here, I didn't pursue any additional vulnerability exploitation. I wrote up details and I sent it to the contact information on the website. So I think that if this ever went to a court of law and somebody tried to prosecute me, then I would feel pretty good because I'd be able to say, look, there was no malice here. I identified a vulnerability. I reported it. There was no exploitation. I'm not using this to try to steal somebody's, off jot or something like that. So that's always the line. I try to, look inwardly to say, would I feel good and would I be able to say that this was done without any kind of malice or without any intent to do harm to the, target website.
Yeah, it's funny because I tell the story a lot when I'm teaching where and this is different, obviously, this is binary exploitation I'm referring to, but I used to, when I would go on flights, as you're very well aware, flying to Australia or New Zealand, wherever, and you could watch all the Lord of the Rings or you can do some exploitation, not on the plane, of course, but I would always download some trialware and still do it to this day sometimes, but just play around with it, sounds fun. And usually you find something, as you very well know. You usually find stuff if you look hard enough. And there was this one, prior to this example, I'd never really had much issues or problems. But this particular one, I get off the plane, I found a remote code execution opportunity where obviously a file format type issue, and you could send somebody a malformed document, and if they were running this application, you could remotely execute code. So I didn't find any official bounty type disclosure policy at this organization, so I just kind of sent it to the help desk and some other contact information, the POC, the technical details, saying I'm willing to sign an NDA, saying I'm doing this for good purposes, here's my information, you can trust me. And that was on a Saturday, and then on, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday that week, and I was in another country, I get an email from a lawyer representing this company, and it says basically cease and desist, all these bad things, lawyer up, bro. And so I'm looking at the CC, and there's all these executives of the company. It's a law firm. I immediately got scared, of course. This is a long time ago. I went and got myself a lawyer, had to pay like a lot of money per hour to represent me. And we ended up coming to terms that everything was okay. But like I remember being on a phone call with executives at this company, my lawyer, their lawyer, and the CEO was like, so just put yourself in my position. I'm out playing golf with my family on a Saturday afternoon, and I get a phone call from a frantic help desk person saying that someone's hacked our product and that they can remotely take over and compromise our customers. He's like, meanwhile, we are on our 5th round of funding, which doesn't sound that good probably. And we're just finally making some profit, and our customers are Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. And he's like, and some benevolent hacker tells me, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt anything. He's like, do you see why we may have gotten concerned and come back at you? And it's like, yeah, I guess when you put it that way, I can see why I may have ruined your day a little bit. But it kind of goes back to that no good deed goes unpunished thing as well, where you really do want to help out organizations, but those with no official kind of disclosure policy can be scary sometimes,
Yeah, I don't know when this happened in the cybersecurity industry, but at some point we flipped to when organizations have vulnerabilities that are not remediated, that are exploited, they are the victim, as opposed to me, the customer, and you just lost all of my PII, and now you're the victim instead of stepping up and taking responsibility for vulnerabilities. So,
right.
I just got a letter from Mr. Cooper, and it's, I think, the 3rd one I've gotten from them where they said, we are the victims of a hack that, by the way, disclosed all of your private financial information for the mortgage that we're carrying for you, right? And that really irritates me, and so like it can happen once, but when it happens again and again, right? And I would think that, maybe a long time ago, people had a different perspective of this, but you could say, we can't change the past, but what we can do is establish a good relationship with this Steve Sims guy, and then leverage the information that he's giving us. He's voluntarily willing to sign an NDA. How much of a risk is that for our organization, right? I don't know. I don't buy the I'm trying to protect my company. I think it's more of I don't know what I'm doing from a cybersecurity perspective as a CEO. So the only option I understand is to lawyer up, and the only option lawyers understand is to get people cease and desist and to try to instill fear in them to get them to be quiet about it. And I say that from that's happened to me too with different companies, and it just kind of sucks. Only for so long can you keep getting hacked into as a big organization, losing people's information, 23andMe, and keep saying that I'm the victim. At some point, you have to step up and say, we need to take responsibility for this, and we need to invest in security to be able to make that an asset, a benefit of encouraging people to do their business with us.
Totally. And that's, I'll let you continue here in one sec, but like one thing you made me think of as well is that's justification that I try to give people who are trying to justify doing some form of product security testing on behalf of their organization before rolling out products. Like I always use an example where I worked at a large financial institution. We were buying over 100,000 voice over IP phones. And if we were just to stick those things out on the network, and one of those devices is the reason why someone is able to get into our organization, who takes the hit? You see ransomware attacks. You see companies making terrible mistakes, and you look at their stock, and it doesn't take a hit at all. You see, like, okay, the bank that was compromised has to take the reputation hit and disclose to all the customers. Yet it was the fault of this vendor who didn't properly secure their product, but they don't take a hit. It's just, I don't want to go down that path, but it's just wild.
It's wild. Yeah, it's a wild industry. Yeah. So thanks, Steve. That I like that conversation. And just to encourage folks, if you have questions as we're going through this, or anything that we're talking about, please ask. I'd love to be able to talk about them. So let's talk about the second example I want to cover here. I'm really into photography. My specialty in photography is turn of the century photography. So I do a lot of tintypes, wet plate, kind of fun chemistry, but hands-on, not digital photography. And there's a photographer that I really find really interesting, and I saw one of his books recently, and I wanted to find out more about him. His name is John Fall. So I went online, and one day I just kind of Googled John Fall. So I Googled John Fall, and I'm looking. And now John Fall's a landscape photographer, and what was interesting about his photography is that he manipulated the landscape by using string or balls or tin foil or all these different things to kind of manipulate how we perceive depth and elements inside of a picture. And his work is really interesting. And so when I was looking through, I see that there's this website here, the International Center of Photography. This is a museum and gallery in New York. So I went to John Fall's website here, or John Fall's information, and trying to see what's going on trying to look at other artwork here. And get a little ICP pop-up here. So I'm just kind of looking through at some of these photographs and trying to see what's going on. There's one in particular I'm hoping I can find without, here we go. Okay. So this is one of John Fall's photographs. And if you click on it, you can get this view right here. Now, this photograph is, of like a desert scape kind of perspective, right? With the craggy kind of ground from being dried up so much, which is kind of interesting. But notice these blue lines. The blue lines from the perspective looks like it's right in front of the camera, but it's actually not. It's actually laid out in the distance. So this is the bottom where his camera is. This is far, I don't know, 100, 200 feet in the distance or so, but it looks like it's all parallel to the lines of the frame. And this is what John Fall did. He kind of manipulated how we perceived these photographs. And honestly, when I went to photography school, we didn't study him, and it's just a shame because I really thought his work was really interesting. So I'm looking at this image, and I'm kind of squinting, and I kind of want to get in close, and I really just want to see the image without the kind of shadow box around it. So I go to right-click to view image. And no. So through JavaScript on the website, they've disabled the right-click button on this website. And this is always one of those things where you roll your eyes and you're like, okay, hold my Red Bull, whatever, right? So, you go to view, you go to your developer tools here, right? And you can use your little element to see where the image is. And now we can see, okay, here's the light box. Here's the URL, and if I copy this URL, put it in a new tab. Okay, now that's all I wanted. I just wanted to see the image in full screen, right? Now I can click and I can, really kind of study. You can see the shadows of where they are, and you can see the string really gets a little, thinner. Here's the yarn is, thicker than it is here in the distance, right? And that's all I wanted. I just wanted to see the image in full screen. But then I noticed this. Then I was looking at this and I'm like, what's that now? s3.amazonaws.com/ICPTMS data. /P/F/A/H. So first 4 letters in John Fall's last name, Fall John, and then, this is the full screen image here. Okay, so now, I don't know. I mean, some people, the joke is, I saw something shiny and I forgot what I was doing. I saw an S3 URL and forgot why I was here in the first place. So now I'm looking at this URL, and the first thing I did was look for directory browsing. Of course, that doesn't work because S3 buckets don't have a normal file system. I always wish that would work, but it never really does. But if you go to the root here and you press enter, you actually get the entire contents of the S3 bucket. So now I'm looking at this, and if you go here, it doesn't show you all the files, but it does show you a lot of files here. The S3 bucket will limit you after so many content elements here, just from a size management perspective. But what this is telling me is that this S3 bucket is not only publicly accessible, but it is listable as well. Now, a publicly accessible bucket, there's a reason for that. Like, you are hosting files for your website, right? This artwork that's being hosted from the International Contemporary Photography Museum, it's all inside of this website here. It's being hosted here. It's the listable part that is really not necessary. And so this actually becomes a big problem for them because the next thing I did here was I said AWS S3 LS S3://ICP-TMS data. And once I used my Amazon account, so this is my private or my own personal Amazon account, we can see that we're now able to list all the contents of the S3 bucket. And we can see the naming convention that we saw earlier. So we see like the P folder. If you go into P, you can go to the F folder, A. Okay, and now we're getting, there's no other photographers. And then here's all the files that they have for John Fall here. And you can see just from scrolling here that there's quite a lot of files here. This is many more files than they have publicly linked on their website. And many of the files are actually accessible here with a resolution that's much higher than what they link to from the website as well. Now I'm curious, and I'm looking at other folders, and I'm saying P. Well, how about what's going on with the L subfolder, A, and then we can see there's T, and now we can see that it's not just John Fall's photography. As far as I can tell, it is every photographer's piece in the entire ICP gallery or the ICP museum collection.
Wow.
So, and I started looking at this a little bit more, and I started seeing, let me go back here for a second. If you look closely, you can see that there's a bunch of shell dot files here as well, which I think is kind of funny. Like, I don't know, I think here's their dot profile files, and stuff like that is here in the S3 bucket as well. I don't know why. I think I made up that somebody just rsynced a directory into an S3 bucket, and then just YOLO, like whatever it is, right? But I started looking, and I copied some of the files out and started looking at what was inside of this bucket here. There's about 333,000 images stored in this S3 bucket that are all publicly accessible. And that's not great, right? The bash dot files and stuff like that. Now, I don't have access to their S3 AWS infrastructure. I don't know how their policies are set up, but if I were to guess, this is how they set up their S3 bucket policy. So they set up their S3 bucket policy to allow either principal AWS star or maybe principal star, I can't really tell, allow access to all the files in the bucket ICP TMS data. But the problem is this S3 list privilege. Right? That action should not be accessible here. And if you read the AWS documentation, they actually tell you, yeah, don't do that. Like if people need to have public access to the files, give them get privileges, but not list privileges. That even get star is probably more broad than is needed for this S3 bucket. Now, I think this is interesting for a couple of things. If you want to host files in an S3 bucket that are intended to be publicly accessible, great. That's a perfect use of that. The files should not be listable, and the only files that should be in that bucket are files that are intended to be publicly accessible. When earlier I mentioned, I'll check out that bug bounty subreddit every now and then, and I see people asking questions, is this worth money? Is this worth money? They said that this is informational, where I think it's a high risk vulnerability and stuff like that. The thing when we look at vulnerabilities that we have to keep in mind is, what is the risk to the customer? What is the risk to somebody like the ICP? So as a photographer, I've had some of my work in shows, and you give the show or the gallery some images, and sometimes you even have to give them high-res images. But as a photographer, I'm not really thrilled about sharing the high-resolution images with anybody, because that's what I print from. There's a difference between sharing a digital image and sharing a print for an image, where now anybody can try to reproduce and make copies of any of that content. Yes.
You know what they can use, Josh? You know what they can use? Hash length extension technique.
Yes, yeah. I mean, hash length extension attacks are one of my favorites. I do know that is a favorite of mine. But this is a problem, because imagine you're the ICP, and it gets out that due to a security mismanagement vulnerability on ICP resources, somebody is able to download all of the museum work in high resolution format, and now they could make prints, sell prints, do whatever they want with any of that artwork. As a photographer, I might say to myself, I don't want to work with those people again, because the last time I worked with them, they lost my artwork, they lost my protected assets, and that's something that we have to consider going forward. So when I looked at this vulnerability, I thought, surely I'm going to report this, and we're going to let them know, and they're going to be able to fix this vulnerability, and then I'm just going to go on with my day. My friends, it's been months, okay? Months ago, I reported this vulnerability, and I spent way too much time on this. I emailed info@security@helpdesk@. I saw that the ICP is active on Facebook and on Instagram, and I reached out to them using DMs on those platforms. I must have emailed them 4 or 5 times now. No response, just nothing. And so at some point, I think, how much responsibility do I need? Like, how much time do I need to invest in trying to help somebody that, doesn't want my help, or clearly, doesn't even have the security wherewithal to have a security @email alias and, to monitor that. And it's not like I don't know they got my messages, because I see they've read them, on these platforms. But it's just something that, continues, and it doesn't get fixed. And, it's this kind of ongoing problem where, maybe this is a small organization technology wise, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some awareness, and certainly be the recipient of people trying to communicate to them and trying to tell them, when there's a significant problem in their organization.
It's crazy, because you just showing that took me back to, like, say 2002, right? Where you go to a website, and let's use eBay as an example, right? Back in the old days of eBay or Craigslist, you could post a photo of what it is that you're selling by literally putting the reference in, URL reference in, image reference. And so if you saw somebody's reference and it said site.tld/images/DSC1234.jpg, someone might try 1235, 1236, right? And just sneaking around and all that. And like, and just how easy it was to see things that you shouldn't have been able to see, and how something as simple as a blank index.html page in that folder would have solved the issue as one technique. Do you think the fact that something is this example of this exposed S3 bucket and such, are we still repeating these exact same mistakes because the complexity and all these configuration options where we can mess up permissions? Or like, what do you think the problem is?
I mean, I think the problem is we have this explosion of technology, everybody wanting to rush out to market to get technology out there, but they don't know or don't see the value in having security assessment done, or they don't have the in-house skill, or maybe they have the in-house skill, but those folks just don't have the time to be able to do this kind of assessments. Like, I remember a couple of years ago during a contentious presidential election, there was a website that former President Trump was using. Now he's using Truth Social, but it was another platform. I can't remember the name of it, but it had a similar IDOR vulnerability on it where, all of the posts were numerically sequential. Anybody could, just enter the URL to get any post. People that deleted posts would unlink them, but they would still exist. And anybody that went direct to the URL could still get that content, and these are sites that have a lot of viewers. And what's more, a lot of very powerful political influence as well, that it would take CounterHack 10 minutes to find that vulnerability. So, it worries me because a lot of people rolling out sites, going out with technology platforms, and using these kind of tools to reach out and, try to embrace new markets and try to achieve whatever their goals are, but without taking the time to do security analysis, and that puts us in a very difficult position.
Yeah,
it's rough.
Good answer, but it doesn't sound promising.
Yeah, and it's rough because there are some tools and some platforms that get a bad rap, but have actually done a lot of really good work. And WordPress comes to mind, right? WordPress is a platform that has historically had a really bad rap for security, but the core WordPress platform has been really, really strong without significant vulnerabilities for a good number of years now. And it is so widely used that it's like the go-to platform for people rolling out websites. And so, sometimes I feel good about that. And I think, well, at least somebody's, doing some good things. Okay, let's talk about WordPress now, okay? So the third example I want to talk about here is this website, arrowfastener.com. So doing photography, sometimes I make custom frames. I do some light woodworking. And so I was looking for a V nailer. So it's a little nail shaped like a V, and you use it for building picture frames. So I thought, I'm going to try to find that because I got a bunch of frames I want to make, and looking for a way to make that a little bit easier for assembly. So I go onto the Arrow Fastener website, and just like I talked about in the beginning, my struggle is that I can't browse a website like a normal person. It doesn't take very long before I'm just looking at a manual and I'm like, what's that now? arrowfastener.com/WP-contents. Now, to be honest, this website kind of screams WordPress to me. And, WordPress has a look. And if you look at a lot of websites, you kind of know the WordPress look, right? It's the banner at the top, this little, SVG file for performing search, and the menu options crossed up here. You got your slider down the bottom showing different products and things like that. It says WordPress, right? And I kind of try to not think about that and just kind of focus on the job I need to get done. But when it screams WP-content, I'm like, well, I need to do something here, right? So like the first thing I always do is look for directory browsing. Okay. So, I look at this URL, I see clearly that's a WordPress site. And historically for WordPress sites, anything in the uploads directory does not have an index file. So if I remove that PDF file name there, sure enough, directory browsing on this target website. So, it doesn't take a long time here. Right. And now you can see that there's, all sorts of files here, and, we can click through and try to identify what these resources are. This is what we see a lot in WordPress sites. Sometimes the folders will have a bunch of activity, sometimes not. If this were a pen test, I would be looking at this and saying, okay, what's interesting about these files? Are they just images? What's the metadata in these images? Anything interesting there? Are there files in these upload directories that are more than just images, and it's not unusual to find JSON documents or other media type inside of these folders here as well. So just kind of browsing around, and I'm looking at this website. To be fair to the WordPress folks, and I'm really a big fan of WordPress because it went from everybody's mocking of WordPress for the security vulnerabilities to a really excellent platform. This is one of the areas where it's not really a WordPress vulnerability though. This is a vulnerability in the web server configuration. So directory browsing has nothing to do with WordPress. If you don't want that feature, then you should turn it off inside of your web server. I'm pretty sure this is an Nginx server, and whoever deployed this system just didn't turn off directory browsing, and so all of this content becomes publicly available. Not a WordPress problem, but if any WordPress developers are listening to this, seriously, WordPress, couldn't you just add an index file automatically and solve this problem? Like, it would go a long way if when you auto create these directories, you just add a default handler page to all of these folders to stop this problem. Yes, it's a server configuration, not a WordPress problem, but I think that this is one opportunity for WordPress to even do a little better to help people from, exposing themselves without really understanding what they're doing. So, this is, I'm not thrilled about this, but now I'm taking a look around. One tool that I've been turned on to recently, it's written by Chris Dale, who's another one of our amazing SANS instructors. It's called WordPress Rest enum. And what it allows you to do is to take a WordPress site and then give it that URL, and it will interact with the WordPress API. Now, on my WordPress servers, I disable the API, just like I disable XML RPC and other things on WordPress that are not absolutely necessary. So like I, disable some things, but for a lot of organizations, WordPress has an API, and that API, even when directory browsing is disabled, can reveal a lot of information about the site. For this particular site, it just saves me time. So instead of clicking on all those folders and trying to see, are there any files, are there any files, are there any files? Here, what I did for this site is I just ran Chris Dale's Python script here, specified the URL, said, give me all the media through the API, but you could also say users, posts, pages, and comments. And then it spits it out as JSON information, and then you can use JSON query or JQ to be able to interrogate that to find out what all that content is. So now, you can get a quick list of all those resources and all those pages to try to see what's going on in that server. So, now I'm, 45 minutes into this website, and I'm taking a look at all these files, and I'm seeing, analyzing the upload patterns and the naming conventions. And, some of these are all lowercase, some are SVGs, some are mixed case, some are, clearly just, digital camera images, stuff like that. There's metadata that's interesting all over the place, PDFs, and, I'm taking a look around on this website. But, where I became concerned is that if you browse up a couple more directories here and go to this uploads directory, you can see a bunch of typical folders Okay, not this .back. I don't know what that is, but you've got a couple of year folders here. I don't know what's going on in 1605, what that's about, but there's no files there, so it's not a big deal. But they've got like some PDF information here. But then I saw backup, and I was like, oh, okay, well let's see what's in here, okay? And I click on it, and I get a 0-length page. Okay, so that's kind of good, right? Here, there's some kind of an index page. It is not in the output from the API, so it's in the uploads directory on the WordPress server, but it was not uploaded through WordPress. So that's good, and I'm looking at this, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. I can see some, they've got some WordPress plugins here. They've got Gravity Forms. They've got URI, which is a security framework for WordPress. Import and export for backup functions. These are plugins for WordPress as well. But here's where I become concerned. They have Backup Buddy installed. And one of the problems with Backup Buddy is it is intended to make backups for WordPress, but it writes the backup logging information in the web root. And so when you start browsing to these files, you can see, okay, here's Backup Buddy, when it ran the WordPress version, PHP version on the site. But if you keep scrolling down here, you start getting a lot more information about what's going on the file system. So these are not just files backed up through WordPress media plugins. These are all the files that exist inside of the backup target directory. So you're starting to see Crowley W, presumably the admin or the tech person that set up this site. This is, ostensibly a staging site that was set up for this platform here. And then when I started looking through here, I started seeing file names in those backup folders where like there's SQL backups, and then with SQL backups, there's password hashes and a whole bunch of other problems on this target site. Again, for me, when I look at a website, it's like I can hardly restrain my hands from pressing, Command L, going to the URL, and then just editing out files, and to look for little things like directory browsing turned on, or cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, or checking out S3 buckets, or any of these other types of things. I think, my experience through doing penetration testing, doing this kind of security analysis, is to look for these types of issues. And so in the beginning, when I said, looks around, yeah, I could rob that place. For me, it's a mindset. It can be a disadvantage because it takes me maybe a little bit longer than maybe a normal person to actually use a website to get something done. I still don't know if the arrow fastener site sells a V-shaped nailer or not. But from a security perspective, this is the kind of thing that becomes valuable for us to be able to foster that sense of, I want to ask those questions. I want to look at making those subtle changes. I want to download a piece of trial software and see what happens when I feed it malformed data. This is the kind of thing that we want to foster. And beyond learning specific skills, learning specific exploits, learning specific tools or things like that, learning to foster that creativity and applying it again and again and again to all the things that we do, for me, has probably been one of the most beneficial parts of my career, because I'm able to carry that over into all the different things that I work on, and it's helped me become a much better security analyst as well. Yeah. And just to loop back on WordPress, I don't mean for this to be a WordPress criticism. WordPress plugins are awful. That's the problem with WordPress, and not just plugins, but themes and other elements added to WordPress. Also, you can't have a strong application security if your underlying security is shaky. So if your web server is not properly secured, directory browsing or other security features, if your underlying operating system, if the network elements, if the other infrastructure components are not sufficiently protected, then you can't expect your application to solve all those problems for you. WordPress is not the one that's exposing the site. It's really just that the site hasn't had any kind of a credible security analysis that anybody with web application testing experience would identify and help the customer resolve in pretty short order. So I wanted to share these three things. They've been on my mind lately, and I want to talk about these kind of meta points too. There's still a lot of bugs out there just waiting to be exploited. We just need the time, the patience, the creativity to try to find them. And sometimes that comes out in web applications. Sometimes it's in binary exploitation, but it could happen in a lot of different areas. So I would encourage folks out there to look for bugs. You don't have to look for public website bugs if you're concerned about, possible ramifications of that, but you can use software that you've purchased. I was just telling Steve before the call, I just bought an electric vehicle, and I can't wait to spend some time hacking it, because now it's my car, and now I can do with it what I want to do. And so, using that as an opportunity to build your skills, to ask those questions, things like that. We saw in the Levan Bakery website cross-site scripting vulnerability that I think early vulnerabilities can be useful for predictors of later problems. And you've probably seen this before when you create an account on a site and it says password too long, or you can't have ampersands or less than or greater than in your password. For me, that's warning sign. Like that's not good, right? So those early indicators can be really valuable for us as well. For the ICP website, unprotected S3 bucket. But I think the important thing there is the risk and understanding. As a photographer, I might not want to do business with this gallery or this museum anymore if they can't protect, if they ask me for these high-res scans and they can't protect my artwork information, my property. And so that, has a big impact on the organization, and try to put yourself in the shoes of the organization to understand what their risk is and how they would perceive that problem. And then for the Arrow Fastener site, one of my favorite parts about that is that I just used my browser. I didn't need the WordPress enum API utility. You could just use your web browser to page through that website, and then, just by using the built-in features of your browser, identify some pretty significant vulnerabilities. Bottom line here is that cyber has ruined my ability to use websites like a normal person, but I don't think I really want it any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome stuff, Jess. Thanks a lot. I got a question that was DM'd to me. I don't know if it's because they were afraid to post it publicly or not, but I figured I'll ask it. And it's funny because I'll start by saying this. I was just up in South Lake Tahoe over the holidays, where you can go skiing and snowboarding and such. And there are casinos there, like the casino hotels there are actually connected directly to the gondola that takes you up the mountain. So you kind of have to walk through them. And when I was walking through one with my daughter, there was I'll just say a rewards, like a player rewards kiosk, and a command prompt was up. Obviously, it somehow broke out of its kiosk lockdown mode, and there was a command prompt up. And of course, like anybody would, you walk over. I just wanted to see if it said administrator up at the top or not. And of course, it said administrator up there. And like, it is really hard to know what to do in that situation, because the question that this person is asking, that I'll ask you now, came straight into my head. So I want to get your thoughts on it, as well as this individual. So thoughts on kiosks. Everywhere I go, I see kiosks, often with the command prompt up. Do you often see, or do you yourself during assessments come across kiosks? Do you break out of kiosks? Do you use them to install command and control? What are the limitations of what someone is permitted to do based on access to a kiosk that seems to be in an improper mode?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'm actually writing another presentation right now on ethics and morals for cybersecurity analysts. And I'm talking about some of my personal experiences in times when I've made decisions and then I've wondered, was that the ethical choice? Was that the moral choice? And, how do I feel about that? when I am at a kiosk and I am, trying to print something, and like the classic escape from a kiosk is the print dialogue in a hotel or something like that, right? I will go as far as to say, press F1, open the help file, open. Yeah, I could own this place, right? Um, installing command and control tools for remote access, absolutely not without any kind of special permission to be able to do that. And for me, when I ask myself, would I feel that I am morally okay? Do I sleep well at night? Do I feel like my outside influences are going to tell me this is okay? Using a terminal and then recognizing that I could break out of this is different from using the terminal, deploying command and control tool to establish persistence and remote access to the target device. And again, it's that, would I feel comfortable standing in front of a judge and saying, yes, Your Honor, I deployed Cobalt Strike on this with a malleable C2 framework to try to hide my activity, but it was just in fun, right? And so for me, like, that's the line. From an ethical perspective, right, we talk about, so in this presentation that I'm working on, I talk about Kantian ethics a lot and the categorical imperative. And so this is not a talk on philosophy, but the two quick rules for Kantian ethics and the categorical imperative is, can everybody do it? And is it generally acceptable? Okay. So, we would say, okay, was Robin Hood ethical? Robin Hood was not ethical, because not everybody can rob from the rich and give to the poor, because then there would be no rich people to rob from anymore. And therefore, that makes Robin Hood's action unethical. So if we were to apply the categorical imperative, right, can everybody open a print dialog box and press F1 for help? Sure. That's functionality that's built right into the kiosk platform, and they left it there for access, right? Can everybody establish remote access, right? I mean, they could, and I guess, if, we're not using too much RAM, we're not going to do a denial of service on the target system. Is it generally acceptable? Like, for me, that's the thing that breaks that as an ethical practice. Is it generally acceptable to install unauthorized software on somebody's asset that you don't own? And I think the answer would be no. And so, that's where we say, okay, well, that would not be an ethical practice. But I like rules, so sometimes I like to break that down and see how the rules come out. The tricky ones are when, the answers change every time you ask the question, and sometimes the rules don't give us the insight that we need.
Yeah, no, good answer. And I mean, to be fair, I think this individual is asking, like, during an engagement, like with permission, do you find yourself coming across those a lot?
Oh, yeah. Oh, during an engagement. Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Without, yeah. Like, we've done, on-site social engineering engagements, pen tests, right, where we dress up and have clipboards and fake name tags and little USB duckies or, whatever to do all these things in an automated fashion. With permission, absolutely, right? If I'm at a Hyatt or a Hilton and, like, I know their kiosks are going to be vulnerable to this, I might say to myself, yep, still vulnerable, but that's where it would stop.
Yeah, it's tough. Like in an example I just gave when I was up in Lake Tahoe, like I just went over to the security booth and said, hey, just let you know that thing should not be in that mode. You might want to have somebody take a look at it, because I mean, I'm not going to name names, but casinos have been in the news recently, right? Not too long ago. And I remember, I won't name the person who said it, but somebody made a smart remark on Twitter, something to the effect of, oh, that big casino chain, it's basically like, have you ever seen the movie or read the story of West Side Story, where you've got, like, the gangs going against each other? It's basically turf wars between all the bad people who have compromised that environment. Like, it's so owned that it's like West Side Story.
Okay, all right, yeah, that's not great then. Yeah. Boy.
Yeah. Great. Well, that's awesome, Josh. I do appreciate it. And I think I'd love to have you on again sometime if you're down. Once you maybe go across some new research or something comes to mind where you're like, I've got to share this with the world. I would love to, of course, be the vehicle that helps you provide that with the world. But I do appreciate it, and I hope you had a great holiday. And any final thoughts?
No, thank you for continuing to ask me even after I, kind of went incognito for a little while there. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Steve. Thanks to folks that are watching live and, joining us afterwards too. And folks have questions, please reach out. And I've got my contact information up here too.
Yeah, great. Thanks, everyone. And hopefully soon I've got Kuba Gretzky. I've been going back and forth with him. Really wants to share some amazing work that he's been doing on Evil Jinx. And I just saw something amazing that he tweeted yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, Josh, but basically someone who was using his tool was able to convince an organization that multi-factor authentication bypass is so freaking easy that the whole organization switched to YubiKeys and go into the FIDO specification. So that's awesome to see. And I can't wait to have him on. So
nice. Good work.
all right.
Yeah.
Talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.